A quiet shift. Jessica Martin leaned against a window, staring out at the city's skyline, the twinkling lights of Los Angeles stretching endlessly beneath her. The evening sky, painted in hues of deep purple and gold, reminded her of everything that was both familiar and fleeting. For the past 5 years, her routine at Sterling Media Group had remained constant, a steady rhythm of work and moments stolen away, like this one, to watch the world outside. Her heart seemed to beat in sync with the city's pulse, but it wasn't the view that occupied her thoughts. It was Ryan Blackwood. He'd become her best friend in every sense, a constant presence in her life, from late-night brainstorming sessions to random cafe breaks that somehow always turned into hours-long conversations. But lately, something had shifted. Something had changed in her feelings toward him, a subtle transformation that, until now, she hadn't fully acknowledged. Sunset again? Ryan's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to find him standing in the doorway of the break room, a warm smile playing at the edges of his lips. As usual, he had 2 cups of coffee, one for each of them. She smiled, grateful for his thoughtfulness. "You know me too well," she said, accepting the steaming mug. The aroma of hazelnut filled the space between them, familiar and comforting. Ryan set down his cup and leaned against the counter. "I've got to admit, though, you look like you're a million miles away," he said. His eyes softened like he could see right through her. "What's on your mind?" Jessica paused, unsure how to put into words the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I've been thinking about everything," she said, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. She took a sip of the coffee, trying to mask the unease that had crept in since the beginning of the year. "It's just that, I don't know. Something's different. Between us, I mean." Ryan's gaze flickered, but he didn't push. He understood the weight of her words without needing her to elaborate. They had always been there for each other. But now, something unspoken hovered between them, pulling their friendship in a direction neither had anticipated. "Have you noticed it?" she asked quietly. Ryan nodded, though he didn't respond right away. Instead, he let the silence stretch, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. The years of inside jokes, late-night phone calls, and shared dreams felt like a heavy blanket, comforting yet constricting in its familiarity. He walked over and sat beside her, his usual easy-going demeanor replaced by a rare seriousness. "You're not the only one who's felt it," he said. "There's been something changing, something I've tried to ignore because I don't want to risk what we have." Jessica swallowed hard. "So, you've been feeling it too?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan met her eyes, his expression open and vulnerable. "I have," he said simply, "and I've been trying to figure out if it's just me. But I think it's more than that, more than just a friendship." The words hit her like a wave, crashing against the shore of her carefully constructed defenses. Jessica looked away, focusing on the distant horizon. She had spent so many years suppressing her feelings, convincing herself that their friendship was enough, that it had to be enough. But now, it felt like something had shifted irrevocably. Part 2. The unexpected invitation. The gala at the Beverly Hills Hotel was in full swing, a sea of elegant gowns and tuxedos swirling beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. Jessica stood near the entrance, adjusting her emerald green dress, the fabric hugging her curves before flowing gracefully to the floor. Her dark hair was loose in waves, cascading over her shoulders in a style Ryan had always admired. But it wasn't the dress or the glamour, or even the crowd that made her heart race. It was Ryan. He'd always been there, her best friend. But tonight, he seemed different. There was something about the way he looked at her that made her chest tighten. Something in his gaze that made it impossible to ignore the tension that had been building between them for months. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Ryan said as he approached, offering her a glass of champagne. His tuxedo fit him perfectly, and Jessica couldn't help but admire how effortlessly he looked every bit the part of the successful creative director he was. Yet, it wasn't his appearance that held her attention. It was the way he made her feel, like she was the only person in the room. "You clean up well yourself," Jessica said, accepting the champagne and taking a sip. Her heart fluttered as she met his gaze, and for a moment, the world outside the ballroom seemed to fade away. As they mingled with colleagues, Their usual playful banter filled the air. Yet, every time their eyes met, there was a crackling energy, an electricity that neither could ignore. They both pretended it was nothing, but deep down they both knew. "She's here," Ryan murmured, his expression suddenly tense. Jessica followed his gaze and saw Caroline Foster, a stunning real estate mogul and Ryan's ex-girlfriend, approaching. Caroline was as poised as ever, her scarlet dress daringly bold. "Ryan, darling," she purred, her eyes locking onto him with unmistakable intent. "We need to talk." Jessica's chest tightened. She could feel the pull between them. Ryan, his face unreadable, turned to Jessica with a strained smile. "I'll be right back." But as he walked toward Caroline, Jessica's heart began to pound. It wasn't just a reminder of Ryan's past with Caroline. It was the way she'd always found a way to keep him close, even after their breakup. Without thinking, Jessica crossed the ballroom floor, her steps firm and purposeful. As she approached, she could hear Caroline's voice rising in protest. "Ryan, darling," Caroline's voice was syrupy, "we have unfinished business." Jessica stepped in front of her. "Ryan, they're about to start the auction," she said, her tone light, though her heart was racing. Ryan turned to face her, his eyes widening in surprise. But Jessica stood firm, a reckless determination filling her. Caroline's gaze shot daggers at her, but Jessica didn't back down. In that moment, Jessica did something she never thought she'd do. Without thinking, she cupped Ryan's face in her hands, stood on her toes, and kissed him. The unexpected invitation continued. The night of the charity gala arrived, and Jessica found herself standing in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the fabric of her emerald green dress. The silk clung to her curves, the delicate material flowing around her like liquid. She had never put so much thought into what she wore for a night out with friends, but tonight felt different. The dress wasn't just for her, it was for Ryan, though she would never admit that aloud. As she finished her hair, letting it fall in soft waves around her shoulders, she thought about the conversation they had earlier in the week. Ryan's words still echoed in her mind, his confession of his feelings making everything feel heavier and more real. She had spent days replaying the moment, trying to process her own feelings, but no matter how hard she tried, one thought kept pushing its way to the front. She couldn't deny it any longer. She was in love with Ryan. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. Their friendship had been her anchor for so long, the one constant in her chaotic life, and now, it felt like that very anchor was slipping away. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face what came next, but as she gazed at her reflection, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be the turning point. The Beverly Hills Hotel glittered under the evening sky, the grand entrance framed by towering columns and lush greenery. Jessica stepped out of the car, adjusting her clutch as she walked toward the grand entrance, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Inside, the atmosphere was pure elegance. Guests mingling beneath the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, their laughter and chatter filling the space with an air of sophistication. Jessica scanned the room, her eyes instantly landing on Ryan. He was standing near the bar, talking to a group of colleagues, but the moment their eyes met, everything else seemed to fade. His gaze softened, and he smiled at her, the kind of smile that made her heart race. She approached him, her breath catching in her throat. "You look incredible," Ryan said, his voice thick with admiration as he took in her dress. "Thank you," Jessica replied, her own voice feeling suddenly breathless. "You clean up well yourself." She gestured to his sharp tuxedo, the way it fit him perfectly, making him look effortlessly handsome. Ryan laughed softly, the sound warm and familiar. "I might say the same to you." They spent the next few minutes exchanging pleasantries with other guests, but their eyes always found each other again, drawn like magnets. It was impossible to ignore the chemistry between them now. Every moment together felt charged with new energy, an unspoken understanding that things were changing, and neither of them was ready to face it just yet. As they spoke with clients and colleagues, Jessica couldn't help but notice how other women seemed to gravitate toward Ryan, drawn to him with a magnetic pull. It was something she had always noticed, but tonight, it made something inside her twist with jealousy. She didn't want to feel this way, didn't want to admit that seeing him with someone else could hurt so much. Her thoughts were interrupted when Ryan leaned toward her, his voice low, almost inaudible over the dinner conversation. "She's here," he murmured. Jessica followed his gaze across the room and saw Caroline Foster gliding through the crowd, her presence commanding and unmistakable. Caroline was tall, blonde, and stunning. Everything Jessica was not. She could see it in Ryan's eyes the moment Caroline approached, a possessive gleam in her expression. Caroline didn't even glance at Jessica as she walked up to Ryan, her voice dripping with a practiced sweetness. "Ryan, darling, we need to talk." Jessica felt a cold wave of discomfort wash over her. She hated how easily Caroline insinuated herself into his space, how she always found a way to cling to him despite their breakup 2 years ago. The realization hit Jessica like a gut punch. She had never fully accepted that Ryan and Caroline's relationship had ended. Even now, Caroline's presence in his life was a constant reminder of everything Jessica had feared. Ryan's expression tightened, but he kept his composure. "I'm in the middle of a conversation, Caroline," he said, trying to be polite but firm. Caroline didn't seem to care. "It's urgent," she insisted, her voice soft and insistent. Her perfectly manicured hand reached out to touch Ryan's arm, and Jessica's breath caught her throat as she watched Caroline guide him away. The sharp edge of jealousy pricked at Jessica's chest, but she swallowed it down. She couldn't let it show. But something inside her snapped, a protective instinct, something she couldn't ignore. Without thinking, Jessica pushed through the crowd, her movements purposeful. She reached Ryan just as he was about to be led away by Caroline, the older woman's hand still firmly on his arm. "Sorry to interrupt," Jessica said, her voice suddenly louder than she intended. "Ryan, the auction is about to start. Didn't you want to bid on that photography package?" Caroline's smile faltered, and she glanced at Jessica with a sharp, calculating look. "We were having a private conversation," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Jessica straightened her back, her voice calm but firm. "We're still talking, Caroline," she said, her eyes never leaving Ryan's. "And I'm sure Ryan would rather be part of the auction than have a private conversation with you." Ryan's eyes widened as he looked from Jessica to Caroline. He seemed almost stunned by her sudden appearance, but Jessica could see the flicker of something like relief in his eyes. Caroline, however, wasn't so easily deterred. She stepped closer to Ryan, her voice lowering to a near whisper. "Ryan, we were good together. We could be great again. I've changed, I swear." Jessica felt a sudden surge of boldness. "You've had your chance, Caroline. It's time to let it go." The words were out before she could stop them, and in the brief silence that followed, Jessica felt all the tension she had been holding on to for years bubble up to the surface. The jealousy, the frustration, the years of quietly watching Ryan date other women, always pretending it didn't hurt. Ryan's lips twitched with amusement, and he turned to Caroline, his voice firm. "I've told you 100 times, Caroline, I'm not interested, and I'm not going to give you another chance." Caroline's face twisted in anger, and she took a step back, her eyes flashing with hostility. "You will regret this," she hissed, her gaze darting between Jessica and Ryan. "Both of you will." With a final, icy glance, Caroline turned on her heel and stalked off into the crowd, leaving Jessica and Ryan standing in the middle of the ballroom, still too close for comfort. Jessica could feel her heart pounding, her breath quickening as she processed what had just happened. She'd spoken her mind, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. But now, standing in front of Ryan, the reality of what they had just done hit her. Ryan was silent for a moment, and Jessica could feel his eyes on her, studying her as if trying to make sense of everything that had just transpired. Then, to her surprise, he stepped closer to her, his hand finding his way to the small of her back. "Thanks for that," he said, his voice softer now. "But I think we need to talk." The night seemed to stretch on in slow motion as the echoes of Caroline's departure faded. Jessica could still feel the intensity of the moment hanging in the air, and her heart was still racing. But there was no turning back now. Ryan was standing so close to her that she could feel the heat from his body, his breath coming in shallow bursts. He hadn't let go of her yet, his hand still resting gently on the small of her back, a reassuring weight that somehow steadied her even as everything felt unbalanced. She could tell by the look in his eyes that the kiss, the one that had been meant to ward off Caroline, had thrown him off balance too. It wasn't supposed to happen. She hadn't planned it. But the instant her lips had met his, It felt like the world had finally clicked into place. His kiss wasn't just a reflex to shut Caroline down. It was everything she had been secretly yearning for. Ryan, Jessica started, but her voice faltered as she tried to find the right words. She hadn't meant for this to happen. She had only wanted to protect him, to make sure Caroline knew where he stood. But now that she had kissed him, now that he had kissed her back, nothing felt certain anymore. Ryan gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch tender, as if he were afraid to break her. "You don't have to say anything right now, Jessica," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "But we need to talk. We need to figure this out. I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." Jessica swallowed hard, her throat tight with the weight of his words. "I never meant for this to happen," she admitted quietly, her eyes searching his. "I only kissed you because I thought it would make Caroline leave us alone. I didn't mean for it to be real." Ryan's thumb traced the curve of her jaw as he leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. "It wasn't just you, Jess," he murmured, his breath warm against her skin. "I kissed you back because I've been feeling it too. I've been feeling it for a long time." Jessica closed her eyes, trying to steady her breath as her emotions swirled inside her. She had always known, deep down, that there was more between them. The small moments, the looks they shared, the little touches when they thought no one was looking. All of it had been building for years. But she had convinced herself that they were just friends, that anything more was too risky, too dangerous to acknowledge. "I've been scared," Jessica admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared of what this could do to us, to our friendship. I don't want to lose you, Ryan. You mean too much to me." Ryan's hand slid down to her shoulders, his grip firm but gentle. "You won't lose me, Jess. I swear to you, I'm not going anywhere." His voice was raw, filled with sincerity, and something else, something that felt like hope. "But we can't keep pretending we don't feel this. We can't keep ignoring it." Jessica nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "But what do we do now? We can't just pretend this didn't happen." Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers with a mixture of uncertainty and determination. "We don't have to pretend anything," he said quietly. "We figure out, we take it one step at a time. But I need you to be honest with me, Jess. Do you want this? Do you want us?" For a long moment, Jessica stayed silent, the weight of his question settling over her like a blanket. She could feel her chest tightening, her thoughts racing. But the answer was so clear, so obvious. How could she ignore it any longer? "I want you," she whispered, her voice trembling with the truth she had kept hidden for so long. "I've always wanted you. I just didn't know how to say it." Ryan's expression softened, and a smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He leaned in slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Then let's stop pretending we don't. Let's stop hiding behind what we've always known and see what happens next." The moment felt suspended in time. There was no rush, no urgency, just a quiet understanding between them that everything had changed, and there was no going back. And for the first time in a long time, Jessica didn't feel afraid. As Ryan leaned in to kiss her again, this time slowly, with more certainty, Jessica's heart soared. The kiss was nothing like the impulsive one in the ballroom. It was soft, gentle, full of something deeper, something that had been building between them for years. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathless, Ryan rested his forehead against hers once more. "We're in this together, Jess. No matter what happens, we'll figure it out. I promise." She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I think we're already figuring it out," she whispered, her heart light with the realization that, somehow, they had already crossed a line, together. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of uncertainty and new possibilities. Jessica and Ryan stayed close, their conversation light but meaningful, full of shared glances and stolen moments. Every touch seemed more intimate now, charged with the unspoken connection they had both been denying for so long. When the evening finally began to wind down, Jessica found herself standing by the door, her coat in hand, ready to leave. Ryan was beside her, his hand resting on her lower back as they made their way through the hotel's grand lobby. "Are you ready to go?" he asked, his voice low, the warmth from his body still radiating through the space between them. Jessica nodded, her heart still fluttering. "Yeah, I think I'm ready." As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Ryan looked at her again, his eyes soft and full of something she couldn't quite place. "I know this is all new," he said quietly, "but whatever comes next, I'm glad it's with you." Jessica smiled, the weight of his words settling deep within her. She had always known they were meant for something more, but now, standing beside him, she felt an overwhelming sense of rightness. "Me too," she replied, her voice full of certainty. And as they walked into the night, hand in hand, Jessica realized that this was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them had ever expected. The future was unknown, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid, because she knew, with Ryan by her side, they could face whatever came next together. The aftermath. The next few days passed in a blur. Jessica couldn't concentrate at work, her thoughts constantly drifting back to that moment at the gala, when she and Ryan had kissed, their worlds shifting in ways they hadn't anticipated. She tried to focus on the tasks at hand, preparing marketing materials for an upcoming pitch, finalizing a project proposal. But every time she looked up from her desk, her mind would wander to the memory of their kiss, the way it had felt, and the raw emotions that had flooded her as they pulled away from each other. It was impossible to ignore the shift between them. It was as though the invisible boundary that had once defined their friendship had been shattered, leaving them standing on the precipice of something unknown. They hadn't talked about it much since that night, only exchanging a few brief text messages here and there. But every time they saw each other, the air between them seemed thick with unsaid words, with the weight of what they had just begun to explore. Jessica spent the following weekend alone, trying to sort through her emotions. She thought about calling Ryan, but a part of her hesitated. What did they even say to each other now? Could they go back to being just friends after what had happened, or were they already too far gone? She had to admit, she was terrified. She was terrified of risking their friendship, terrified of potential fallout if things didn't work out, terrified of what might happen if they couldn't navigate the new territory between them. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't ignore what she felt. She couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed, because everything had changed. On Monday morning, she arrived at the office earlier than usual, hoping to catch a quiet moment before the day's chaos began. She sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over her keyboard as she stared at the screen, but all she could think about was Ryan. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Morning." Ryan's voice drifted into the room. She looked up to find him standing in the doorway, looking as calm and collected as ever, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Morning," Jessica replied, forcing a smile. She gestured to the empty chair across from her desk. "Come on in." Ryan stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, the sound echoing in the stillness. He seemed a little more serious than usual, his expression more contemplative, but there was a softness in his eyes that made Jessica's chest tighten. He sat down across from her, his posture open but careful, as if he were waiting for her to speak first. "So, about the other night," he began, his voice steady but soft. "I've been thinking a lot about it. About us." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She swallowed hard, trying to calm her racing thoughts. "Me too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking a lot too." Ryan's gaze softened, and for a moment, they just sat there in silence, the weight of the unspoken words hanging heavily between them. Jessica felt like her heart was going to burst from her chest. Finally, Ryan broke the silence, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't want to rush things, Jess. I know we both got a lot to figure out, but I don't want to pretend anymore that I don't feel what I feel, what we've always felt, really, and I don't want to lose you, not as my friend and not as something more." Jessica's breath caught in her throat. "I don't want to lose you either," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've been scared, Ryan, scared that if we took this step, we might ruin everything. But I can't keep pretending that I don't want you. I've wanted you for so long, and I think I've always known, even before the kiss. I just didn't know how to say it." Ryan leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been scared too," he confessed, his voice low. "But I'm not scared anymore. Not about us. I don't know where this is going, and I don't know what comes next, but I know I want to see where it takes us. I want to see what happens when we stop holding back. Jessica's heart swelled in her chest. She could feel the weight of his words, the sincerity in them. And for the first time, she felt like they were both standing on the same ground. I want that too, she said, her voice steady now, more confident than it had been just moments before. I don't want to pretend anymore either. Ryan's lips curved into a small, reassuring smile. Then let's stop pretending, Jess. Let's take it one day at a time. We don't have to have all the answers right now. We just have to take the leap and trust each other. Jessica nodded, the uncertainty that had been clouding her thoughts slowly fading away. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was ready to face whatever came next. The rest of the week passed in a whirlwind of emotions. Jessica and Ryan were careful with each other, taking small steps towards something new. They'd share a quiet lunch in the break room, their hands brushing lightly across the table, or steal moments in the hallway, exchanging a look that spoke volumes without words. It was like they were dancing around the inevitable, but the connection between them was undeniable, and each passing day brought them closer to something real, something deeper. On Friday, the two of them went out for drinks after work, just like they always had. The only difference now was that everything felt charged with new energy. They weren't just best friends anymore. They were something else, something more. The air between them seemed to hum with potential, and as they clinked their glasses together in a quiet toast, Jessica realized that, despite the uncertainty, she had never felt more certain about anything in her life. Ryan looked at her over the rim of his glass, his expression playful but thoughtful. I know this might sound cliché, but I'm glad we're doing this, Jess, he said, his voice full of warmth. No matter how messy it gets, I think it's worth it. Jessica smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and excitement. Me too, she said softly. I've always wanted this, Ryan. I just didn't know how to let myself have it. Ryan reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing hers, sending a spark of electricity through her. Well, you have it now, he said, his voice full of promise. And I'm not going anywhere. As they sat together, the noise of the bar fading into the background, Jessica realized that this was just the beginning. The future was still uncertain, but as long as they were in it together, she felt ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, she was no longer afraid. Moving forward, the weeks that followed were filled with both excitement and uncertainty. Jessica and Ryan had begun to navigate their new relationship cautiously, trying to balance the deep connection they shared with the pressures of maintaining their professional lives. At work, nothing had changed outwardly. They still worked side by side, laughed at the same jokes, and brainstormed creative ideas together. But beneath the surface, everything was different. There were moments when the reality of what they were doing hit Jessica like a wave, moments when she wondered if they were moving too fast, if this could somehow jeopardize everything they had built over the years. But when she looked at Ryan, when she saw the genuine affection in his eyes, her fears seemed to melt away. He was there with her every step of the way, and that made all the difference. They spent weekends exploring new restaurants, hiking to the hills of Los Angeles, and, on occasion, just staying in, enjoying the simple pleasures of each other's company. It was in those quiet moments that Jessica realized how much she had been missing, how much she had been holding back. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was living in someone else's shadow. She didn't feel like she had to pretend. One Friday evening, as they sat on the rooftop of their favorite bar, watching the city's lights twinkle below them, Ryan turned to her with a contemplative expression. The wind ruffled his dark hair, and Jessica caught a glimpse of the same quiet intensity that had always drawn her to him. You know, Ryan began, his voice calm and steady, I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night at the gala. Jessica looked at him, her curiosity piqued. She remembered the moment all too clearly. The kiss, the confusion, the vulnerability. That night had changed everything. But it was also the night they had laid everything out in the open. Ryan continued, his gaze never leaving hers. About how you've always wanted this. How you've always known. I think it's crazy how long we've been circling around this, pretending like it wasn't there. Jessica smiled softly, feeling the warmth of his words settle in her chest. Yeah, it's like we've been living on opposite sides of the same coin for years, afraid to flip it over and see what's on the other side. Ryan nodded, his lips curving into a smile. I know, and I'm glad we finally did. But I think we should talk about what comes next. Really talk about it. We're not just friends anymore. So what happens when things get complicated? The question caught Jessica off guard, and she set her drink down, her mind racing. She knew this moment would come, when they would have to face the reality of their new relationship, when they would have to define what it meant to be more than just best friends. I don't know what the future holds, she said, her voice steady but vulnerable. But I do know that I want to be with you. I want to take this risk. Ryan, I've been terrified for so long, but I can't keep hiding from what's real. Ryan's eyes softened as he reached across the table, his hand brushing hers gently. I'm scared too, but not of being with you. I'm scared of messing up, scared of losing you. But if we don't try, we'll never know what we could have. Jessica squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of his words, the sincerity in them. She realized that, despite her fears, there was nothing she wanted more than to see where this path would take them. So what do we do now? She asked, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Ryan leaned back in his chair, looking out at the city below them. The lights of Los Angeles flickered like stars, and for a moment, everything felt impossibly perfect. He turned back to her with a soft smile. We take it one day at a time. We trust each other, and we figure it out. We've already been through so much together. Now, let's see where this new chapter takes us. Jessica felt a sense of peace settle in her chest, the tension from earlier melting away. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was standing on the edge of something unknown. Instead, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next few weeks were full of small moments that made their relationship feel more real. Late-night phone calls, shared secrets, quiet mornings over coffee. They laughed more than they had in years. And with each passing day, the bond between them deepened, solidifying something that had always been there, only hidden beneath the surface. But it wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the weight of their new dynamic felt heavy, and they had to work through the challenges that came with it. They had disagreements, misunderstandings, and moments of hesitation. But each time, they worked through it, communicating openly and honestly, realizing that the foundation they had built as friends was strong enough to withstand the bumps in the road. One afternoon, as they sat on the couch together, sharing an impromptu lunch at takeout, Ryan turned to her with a thoughtful expression. He said, his tone serious but gentle, I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night, about how you didn't want to risk losing me. And I realized something. Jessica raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's that? Ryan took a deep breath, his gaze focused on her as if he were about to say something important. I don't want to lose you either. I don't want to take you for granted, Jess. And I don't want to make the same mistakes I've made before. I want to do this right. With you, I want to see where we go together. Jessica felt a rush of emotion at his words. She had always known how much Ryan cared for her, but hearing him say it out loud made her heart swell with gratitude. I want that too, she said softly, her hand finding his. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that whatever happens, I'm in it with you. And I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose us. Ryan smiled, his eyes warm and full of love. Then we'll make it work. No matter what.